The first signal came quietly, hidden in the noise of deep space transmissions. At first, scientists thought it was just interference from a dying star. Then the pattern repeated. 3 short pulses, 2 long ones, and 1 deep tone that shook every receiver on Earth. It was not random. It was a message. By the time the world understood what it meant, it was too late. The sky had already begun to change. Satellites blinked out one by one as if something was swallowing their signals. Then telescopes caught sight of enormous shapes moving through the darkness, machines so large they blotted out entire constellations. Humanity had dreamed for centuries of meeting life beyond Earth, but no one expected that meeting to start with laughter. The first broadcast from the visitors arrived on every channel, every phone, every screen. The image was clear. Tall silver beings standing in perfect lines, their faces smooth and cold. They called themselves the Varn Dominion. Their voices were calm, almost gentle, but filled with mockery. They said they had been watching Earth for centuries, learning its languages, its stories, its dreams. Then they laughed. Their laughter echoed through space and across every speaker. They called humans myth-makers, weak creatures who told fairy tales to hide from the truth of how small they were. You tell stories of gods and heroes, their leader said, because you are afraid to see yourselves as you truly are, fragile, mortal, and powerless. The message ended with a promise they would come not to destroy, but to correct humanity's understanding of reality. People didn't know what that meant. Governments held emergency meetings, scientists worked without sleep, and the news filled every hour with fear. Some said the Varn were bluffing, trying to scare Earth into surrendering. Others said they were explorers, not conquerors. Yet as the days passed, those enormous shapes grew clearer in the sky, moving closer. When the first ship entered orbit, the world stood still. It wasn't like the flying saucers from old movies. It was a floating city of metal and light, the size of a continent casting a dark shadow over the oceans. Its arrival pulled the tides high enough to flood coastal towns. The air shimmered with strange energy, and every compass spun in circles. Then, just like that, the Varn began to speak again. Their new message wasn't a threat, it was a mockery. They played human songs, read passages from ancient myths, and laughed at them. They repeated stories of dragons, warriors, and angels, calling them the fantasies of frightened children. Their scientists called it an experiment in primitive imagination. Across the world, people felt small. Some fell to their knees, praying for mercy. Others shouted in anger, demanding their governments fight back. Yet no one had a weapon strong enough to face something like the Varn. Every attempt to contact them failed. Every missile test froze in midair as if an invisible hand had stopped it. The Varn didn't attack cities. They didn't bomb or burn. They simply hovered above the Earth, controlling communication and power grids. They showed that they could crush the planet whenever they wanted, and didn't need to prove it with violence. Their laughter alone was enough. In a small village far from the capital, an old veteran sat alone by a radio. The world had forgotten him long ago. His medals were tucked away in a wooden box, the colors faded by time. He had seen war in his youth, real war, where men fought not for pride or power but because they had no choice. The news on his cracked screen spoke of surrender talks, of leaders trying to reason with the Varn. Yet he knew in his bones that reason would not save them. He had seen enemies who believed they were gods before. They always needed to be reminded they could bleed. Still, the world didn't listen to old soldiers anymore. People wanted peace, not stories of resistance. The veteran simply turned off his radio and stared at the horizon, where a faint silver light glowed above the clouds. He whispered to himself, "They laugh at our myths because they never had to live one." Meanwhile, the Varn continued their study of humanity. They sent drones to Earth's surface, recording daily life, taking samples and analyzing behavior. Their soldiers, tall and armored in shining suits, walked among the ruins of power stations and cities, observing rather than conquering. Children who saw them from afar said they looked like walking stars. The soldiers ignored the people completely. To them, humans were insects beneath glass, interesting to watch, too weak to fear. The laughter never stopped. Every night the skies glowed with Varn projections, showing ancient human paintings, myths, and legends, always followed by a calm voice saying, "Fairy tales for a dying world." People began to lose hope. The internet was filled with despair. Some said resistance was useless. Others said humanity deserved to be mocked for believing it mattered in the universe. Still, A small group of scientists and military officers refused to accept that. They met in secret places, far from the eyes of the Varn drones, trying to find weaknesses in the alien systems. They failed again and again. The aliens' technology was beyond comprehension, yet every failure taught them something new. Each time they regrouped, one name kept coming up: the old soldier who had once led a team through impossible missions. They said he might know how to fight an enemy that didn't fear anything. In the skies above, the Varn laughed again. Their leader made a public broadcast standing in a halo of light. "We come from a galaxy where fear has been erased," he said proudly. "We do not fight. We do not die. We perfect." Then his expression shifted into a strange kind of amusement. "Your species is unique," he continued. "You build your courage out of stories. You whisper to yourselves that your heroes will rise when the darkness falls. Tell me, humans, where are your heroes now?" The question spread like wildfire. Every television, every phone, every radio repeated it. "Where are your heroes now?" For a moment, there was silence. No one answered. People stayed inside their homes. The world had never felt so small, so powerless. It seemed the laughter of the Varn would echo forever. Then, deep in the quiet of the countryside, a radio crackled to life. It wasn't a government message, not a scientist's warning. It was a single human voice, low and steady. The old soldier spoke only one sentence: "Heroes are made when laughter dies." The broadcast lasted only a few seconds before the signal was cut. Yet those few words spread faster than any message before it. Something changed that night. People began whispering the phrase to each other in crowded shelters, in dark streets, even in the ruins of cities. Heroes are made when laughter dies. The Varn dismissed it as superstition. Their analysts reported no threat. They continued their studies, amused that the humans clung to emotional defiance. The old veteran watched from his window as the alien lights moved slowly across the sky. He didn't smile, but there was a quiet fire in his eyes. The world might have forgotten the meaning of courage, but he hadn't. Somewhere deep inside him, the instinct that had carried him through war began to stir again. He started to listen to the radio at night, catching fragments of military chatter, scattered resistance messages, and frightened voices asking for guidance. He never spoke again on the air, but his silence became a signal in itself. People began organizing, small groups at first: technicians, farmers, engineers, anyone who refused to bow to the Varn. They didn't know what to do yet, but they were ready to try. Above them, the aliens watched and laughed. They thought it was foolish, even cute, that humans still believed in hope. They had no idea that the same hope they mocked was quietly turning into something far stronger, something that would one day make the mighty Varn remember what fear felt like. For now, the world slept under a sky of metal giants. Humanity felt tiny, like a candle under a storm. Yet somewhere in that endless night, a spark had been lit. It wasn't loud, it wasn't bright, but it was alive. The Varn could laugh all they wanted. The old soldier was already planning to teach them why humans told myths in the first place. The days passed slowly after the alien arrival. The world seemed frozen in fear. People woke up, went to work if they could, but their hearts weren't in it. News channels showed the same thing every hour. Images of alien ships floating quietly above the planet, their silver hulls shining in the sunlight. There were no battles, no explosions, just silence and the constant feeling that humanity was being watched. The Varn soldiers roamed certain cities freely now. They didn't speak to anyone. They didn't need to. They moved like shadows, collecting information, scanning buildings, and recording everything they saw. Whenever one of them passed, people stopped breathing. They weren't sure if the aliens even noticed them. To the Varn, humans were nothing more than a study subject. In a small, quiet town hidden behind misty hills, the old veteran kept to himself. His hair had turned white and his hands carried the tremor of time, yet his mind remained sharp. He watched every movement in the sky, every light that blinked where no star should be. His neighbors thought he had gone strange with age. He didn't argue. He just listened. Every night he sat by his radio. It was an old thing, patched with wires and tape, but it worked. Sometimes he caught broken pieces of conversation. Scientists whispering about the Varn's technology, soldiers asking for guidance, even frightened civilians sharing prayers. Each message was a reminder that people hadn't given up completely. One night, as rain tapped against the windows, the veteran picked up a strange transmission. It wasn't from Earth. The voice was smooth, clear, and cold. It was the Varn. They were speaking in English, but their tone had that same cruel amusement that always lingered in their broadcasts. "The human world remains predictable," the voice said. "Their fear is constant. Their spirit is fading. Observe them closely, for soon they will accept their truth." The veteran leaned closer, adjusting the radio's frequency. The message continued. "If resistance rises, let it rise. It will only prove the futility of their myths." The voice paused, then laughed softly. "Even now they search for heroes, let them. They will learn that legends cannot save them." He switched off the radio. The room felt colder, heavier. Outside, thunder rolled through the valley. The old man rubbed his hands together and whispered, "They don't understand us at all." The next morning, the town woke to silence. No birds sang, no engines ran. The power was gone again. Children played with sticks on the dusty road, pretending to fight invisible monsters in the sky. They laughed and shouted, "We'll chase them away." Their mothers smiled weakly, but their eyes were filled with worry. The Varn drones floated overhead, silent and watchful. The veteran stood near the gate, watching the children. He saw something in them that the aliens never could, something small but unbreakable. It wasn't strength or intelligence. It was belief. Humans believed in something greater, even when everything seemed lost. Maybe that was what the Varn hated most. That night, he walked to the edge of the forest where an old communication outpost stood. It had been abandoned years ago, a rusted skeleton of antennas and blinking lights. The veteran entered quietly, his boots echoing against the metal floor. He knew the place well. He had used it once during a war long before the aliens ever came. He found the control panel covered in dust, but when he pressed a few switches, it came to life with a weak hum. The screen flickered, then glowed faintly. "Still alive," he murmured. With careful hands, he began tuning the transmitter. After an hour of effort, a signal connected. Static filled the room, followed by a voice, tired, shaky, but human. "This is Base Relay 9. Identify yourself," he replied calmly. "I'm just a listener." There was silence for a moment, then the voice spoke again. "You're the one from the old broadcast, aren't you? The one who said heroes are made when laughter dies." The veteran didn't answer right away. Then he said quietly, "You don't need names. You just need a reason to stand." The voice hesitated, then asked, "Do you have a plan?" The old man looked at the glowing controls, the faint reflection of his weathered face on the screen. "Not yet," he admitted. "But I know how they think. They believe fear is control. Maybe we can show them that fear can belong to them too." The connection faded. He sat in the dim light for a while, listening to the hum of the machines. Somewhere far above the clouds, the Varn were laughing again. He could almost hear it. In the days that followed, rumors began to spread across the planet. People said a shadow was moving against the Varn, disrupting their drones, cutting off their data streams. No one knew who or what it was. Some said it was the military. Others believed it was hackers. A few whispered that it was something else, a man who refused to bow. The veteran avoided attention, blending with the crowd whenever he went into town. Yet strange things began happening wherever he passed. A broken communication tower suddenly came back to life. A group of engineers, inspired by his quiet words, built a small transmitter hidden inside a barn. They called it the Pulse. Its signal carried short, coded messages of hope. The first message was simple. "They can watch us, but they can't own us." Within a week, the phrase appeared painted on walls, printed on scraps of paper, whispered in shelters. The Varn saw it as harmless rebellion. They didn't realize it was spreading faster than any signal they could track. The veteran spent his nights writing notes and diagrams by candlelight. He studied everything humans knew about the Varn, their movements, their energy fields, their communication systems. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a strategist. He had fought enemies who believed they were unbeatable before. Every empire had a weakness. The secret was to find it before it found you. One night he sat outside, staring at the sky. The stars looked smaller now, hidden behind the alien ships. "You think we're myths," he said softly. "Maybe we are. But even myths can fight back." A low hum filled the air. A Varn patrol ship passed overhead, its lights scanning the ground. The veteran stood perfectly still until it disappeared beyond the hills. When the sky cleared, he smiled faintly. "You can't scare the wind," he muttered. In the following weeks, human resistance began to take shape in scattered places. Farmers hid stolen equipment in fields. Mechanics learned to build jammers out of old radios. Young people started passing coded messages through songs and poetry. None of them had weapons strong enough to fight the Varn, but they had something else, the will to try. The old veteran became a legend without wanting to. People never saw his face, but they heard his words through faint radio signals. Courage, he said one night, is not the absence of fear. It's walking through it until the other side trembles instead. The Varn dismissed it as human nonsense. Their report said, subject species remains emotionally unstable. Resistance limited to minor disruptions. Yet among the alien ranks, a quiet unease began to grow. Drones disappeared in dark valleys. Patrol ships malfunctioned for no reason. Some soldiers claimed to hear whispers in the static of their own transmissions, human voices speaking words they didn't understand. The old man knew these were small victories, but every victory mattered. Fear, once spread by the Varn, was beginning to return to them. Slowly, quietly, the balance was shifting. One evening, as he sat by his fire, he received another transmission. This time it came from deep space. The voice was human, a young woman, confident and steady. We've intercepted their communication frequencies, she said. Your plan worked. We can listen to them now. He leaned forward, his tired eyes bright again. Good, he said. Then let them hear us too. For a moment, the world outside was silent. The alien ships floated like silver ghosts against the stars. Somewhere inside them, their soldiers continued their study, unaware that the man they mocked as a relic of a dying world was already shaping the beginning of their greatest fear. The veteran turned off the radio, his hands steady now. He looked at the distant hills glowing with alien light and whispered to the darkness, if they laugh at our myths, then it's time to show them what myths are made of. That night, far above the earth, an alien commander paused at his console. For the first time since their arrival, he thought he heard something, a heartbeat echoing faintly through the static. It was not from any machine. It was human. He didn't know it yet, but that sound would soon become the rhythm of a war they never expected. The air of Earth had grown quieter since the Varn arrived. Cities no longer buzzed with life. Streetlights blinked weakly. Power grids failed one after another, and many people no longer dared to look at the sky. The alien ships floated like silent moons, casting long shadows that stretched across continents. The laughter of the Varn still echoed in their broadcasts, though it had become less frequent now, perhaps because something had started to bother them. No one knew exactly when the first incident happened. Some said it was in a coastal town where a Varn patrol vanished without a trace. Others believed it began in the mountains when one of their machines exploded suddenly, leaving only fragments behind. Whatever it was, it became clear that the aliens were no longer untouchable. Someone or something had begun to fight back. At first, the aliens ignored it. They believed the disappearances were caused by human error, maybe sabotage among their own kind. But the pattern continued. Patrols stopped reporting in. Drones malfunctioned. Energy towers were destroyed overnight, as if struck by invisible hands. The Varn called it an anomaly. Humans began to call it hope. In an underground shelter hidden beneath an old power plant, a small group of people gathered around a table. The only light came from a dim lantern. Among them sat the same old veteran who had spoken once through the radio, the man who had lit a spark in a world full of fear. His face was tired, but his eyes carried the calm of someone who had lived through darkness before. They had no official army now, only groups of survivors and former soldiers working together. Their weapons were simple, radio waves, EMPs, and traps built from scrap. They knew they couldn't win through strength, so they used something else, unpredictability. The Varn couldn't understand chaos. Their world was one of perfection and order, while humans thrived in the messy, broken edges of life. That was their first weapon. The veterans' plan was simple. Instead of attacking directly, they would make the aliens afraid of what they couldn't see. They began striking their supply drones, jamming communication links, and spreading false signals that made the Varn chase shadows. Every time the aliens tried to track the attacks, they found nothing. It was like fighting ghosts. One night, the veteran watched through a cracked monitor as a Varn transport ship hovered above a ruined city. His people had planted old military beacons below, sending fake signals that looked like human gatherings. The aliens descended carefully, expecting resistance. Instead, the ground beneath them exploded, not with deadly weapons, but with smoke and light designed to blind their scanners. For the first time, a Varn ship retreated. It wasn't a major victory. No one had been killed, no ship destroyed. Yet the sight of it filled the human fighters with something stronger than pride. It gave them belief. They could fight back. They could make the aliens fear. The veteran didn't celebrate. He simply said, "They'll be angry now." That's when mistakes begin. Across the world, similar attacks began to spread. They weren't coordinated, but they didn't need to be. People had found courage again. Farmers sabotaged alien harvest machines. Engineers hijacked drones and turned them against their masters. Even children played their part, sending messages of hope through secret channels. The Varn started noticing. Their once perfect operations began to crumble. Their leaders ordered investigations, deploying more drones and increasing surveillance. Yet the more they tried to control, the more the humans slipped through their fingers. Inside one of their floating command ships, the Varn commander stood before a screen filled with static. "They are irrational," he said to his officers. "Their actions lack pattern." One of his subordinates replied, "That is what makes them dangerous." On Earth, the veteran was listening. His team had intercepted the conversation. When he heard those words, a faint smile crossed his face. "They're starting to understand," he said. Still, he knew this was only the beginning. Fear was a powerful weapon, but it had to be used carefully. Humans couldn't rely only on chaos. They needed direction, purpose, something greater than anger. He looked around the dark shelter where his small team worked. Each of them carried scars, some on their bodies, others in their eyes. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were survivors. And yet, in their silence, there was a determination that the Varn could never measure. Days turned into weeks, and the attacks became bolder. Humans began naming their operations after old myths: Operation Phoenix, Leviathan, Thunderstrike. The names spread through the resistance networks, carried on whispers and coded broadcasts. To the aliens, these were meaningless words. To the humans, they were a reminder of who they were, a species that had always turned stories into strength. One stormy night, the veteran led a mission himself. They were targeting an alien outpost near the remains of an old city. The air was thick with rain and lightning flickered across the sky. As they approached the site, he raised his hand for silence. The only sound was the steady drip of water from the ceiling. The Varn guards stood motionless near their control towers, unaware that humans were crawling through the rubble beneath them. The team placed small EMP charges along the cables, whispering their countdown softly. The veteran's hand trembled as he connected the last wire. "Ready," one of them said quietly. He nodded, pressing the trigger. The ground shuddered as the lights around the outpost flickered and died. The Varn soldiers looked around in confusion. Their suits glowed briefly, then dimmed. In the chaos, the humans slipped away unseen. By the time the Varn restored power, their entire communication grid in that area had collapsed. For a few hours, they were blind. To them, it was a technical failure. To the resistance, it was a message. The next morning, a human broadcast broke through the alien frequencies. It played only one line, spoken in a calm voice. "Even the mighty can stumble in the dark." The Varn tried to trace the signal but failed. Their systems couldn't find its source. The message repeated for an entire day before vanishing. It became a symbol across the planet, whispered by people hiding in basements, painted on broken walls. The veteran watched all this unfold from his small base. His hands shook slightly as he poured himself a cup of tea. He wasn't celebrating. He had seen enough wars to know that victory was never simple. Still, he couldn't ignore what was happening. The aliens were no longer laughing. Reports began to surface that some Varn soldiers were refusing to land on Earth's surface. They claimed strange things happened there. Malfunctions, strange noises, sudden bursts of light. Some said they heard voices on their communication lines whispering old human words like vengeance and honor. The Varn commanders dismissed these as malfunctions, yet unease began to grow among them. The old soldier listened to these reports and said quietly, "Good. Let them feel what we felt." That night, as the wind howled through the cracks of the shelter, he sat near the radio again. His voice, rough but steady, echoed across a dozen hidden frequencies. "You don't need to see the enemy to fight," he said. "You only need to remind them that you're still here." His message spread like fire through the underground networks. People who had been silent for months found courage to act. A mother who had lost her son built a jamming device in his memory. A group of factory workers stole alien fuel cells and turned them into power for their towns. Across the world, the quiet resistance became a storm. From above, the Varn looked down and saw chaos. Their scanners couldn't predict it, their logic couldn't process it, and their pride couldn't accept it. For the first time, they felt something they couldn't name. It was fear. The veteran knew the war was far from over. The Varn still had power far beyond anything humans could match. Yet something deeper had shifted. Humanity was no longer waiting to be saved. They were saving themselves piece by piece, action by action. As dawn broke over the horizon, the old soldier stepped outside his shelter. The first rays of sunlight touched the hills, glowing against the silver reflection of the alien ships above. He stood quietly, the wind brushing against his face. "They laughed at our myths," he whispered. "Let's see how they handle a legend." Above the earth, the Varn commander stood before his console again, watching strange data flashing across the screen. Every few seconds, one word appeared in human language, written across their intercepted channels. "Ghost." The commander frowned. "What does it mean?" No one answered, but down below the humans already knew. A legend was being born. Not in stories or songs, but in the quiet courage of those who refused to kneel. The ghost of Earth had arrived. The world had changed again. Once people had looked at the sky with fear. Now they looked at it with quiet defiance. The alien ships still hung there like enormous shadows, but something about their presence felt weaker. They still had power, still had control, but no longer the respect or terror they once commanded. Humans had learned how to fight back, even without weapons of steel. They had found their weapon in belief. Across the planet, whispers spread faster than any broadcast. Stories of the ghost of Earth filled underground shelters, market stalls, and broken schools where children still gathered to learn. No one knew if the ghost was one person or many. Some said he was an old soldier who could move unseen through the enemy's sensors. Others said he was a spirit of the fallen, protecting Earth from the skies. The aliens called it nonsense. Yet their soldiers began to hesitate when flying alone through dark regions of the planet. The veteran never asked to be called anything. He worked from the shadows, guiding the resistance through coded radio waves. His messages were never long, never emotional, but each carried meaning that lit a spark in whoever heard it. One night, the resistance gathered around a flickering hologram. A young technician had intercepted a transmission from the Varn. The alien voice was sharp and angry. "The humans have begun using myths as signals," it said. "They name their attacks after ancient gods and creatures. This pattern must be broken." The veteran watched silently. The technician looked up and asked, "Should we stop using those names?" He shook his head slowly. "No. Keep them afraid of the stories they laugh at." He understood something that the Varn never could. Humans didn't just fight with strength. They fought with meaning. Every story, every legend, every old myth carried the weight of generations who had survived worse than fear. Myths were not lies. They were the shape of courage itself. That night, the veteran drafted a new plan. It was dangerous, far more than any they had attempted before. The Varn controlled Earth's skies with massive satellites that watched every corner of the planet. If they could blind even one of those eyes, humans could move freely for a while. But to reach it, they would need to get closer than anyone had ever dared. He gathered his team, a small group of engineers, medics, and radio operators. They met in a ruined subway station deep beneath the city. The air smelled of rust and oil, but their spirits were strong. The veteran spread out a map made of torn paper and old blueprints. "We'll strike here," he said, pointing to a location above the clouds. "They call it the Central Eye. It's their biggest satellite." The others exchanged uncertain glances. One asked, "How do we reach it?" The old soldier looked up at the ceiling, his voice calm. "The same way humans have always reached the impossible, with a little madness and a lot of hope." The team laughed quietly, not because the plan was funny, but because they needed that spark of courage. It reminded them they were still human. They began their preparations. Mechanics worked day and night to rebuild an old shuttle once used for cargo transport. Its parts were broken, patched together with scraps and wires scavenged from abandoned factories. It was far from perfect, but it was all they had. They painted one word on its hull before launch: myth. When the day arrived, the world held its breath. The shuttle rose slowly through the thick clouds, its engines trembling. Down below, people watched from hidden camps, whispering prayers. The Varn saw the movement immediately. Their scanners locked on and alarms echoed across their command ships. Human craft detected, one of the alien officers reported. Their commander replied coldly, "Destroy it." Lasers from the orbiting ships fired into the sky, cutting through clouds and air. The shuttle shook violently, its panels glowing from the heat. Inside, the team held tight, faces pale but determined. The veteran's voice came through their radio. "Don't fight to survive. Fight to be remembered." At that moment, a massive storm erupted. Thunder cracked across the horizon and lightning flashed between the clouds. The alien sensors struggled to read through the chaos. The shuttle disappeared from their scanners. Inside the storm, the small human craft pushed upward, hidden by nature itself. It climbed higher and higher until the blackness of space opened before it. The central eye shimmered above, a huge sphere of metal and light watching the world below like a god. The team activated their device, a signal disruptor made from old human technology and alien scraps. Its pulse spread like ripples through the void. The eye flickered once, then twice before its light went out completely. On Earth, for the first time since the invasion, the sky turned dark in the places once covered by the aliens' glow. The stars shone freely again. People stepped outside and gasped. Children pointed upward, laughing with tears in their eyes. The alien commander shouted orders, trying to restore power. "Find the source," he demanded. Yet every signal pointed to nowhere. The humans had vanished into the storm. The veteran, sitting by his radio, listened to the chaos with quiet satisfaction. "That's what happens when you underestimate stories," he whispered. For a few precious days, Earth was free from the aliens' gaze. The Resistance used that time to rebuild networks, move supplies, and rescue trapped families. Hope spread like a tide that no machine could stop, but the Varn were not finished. They began sending messages again, their voices colder than before. "You think you can fight us with myths," their leader said through every broadcast. "Your stories are nothing but noise." Still, the humans did not stop. In fact, they made their messages louder. Radio stations that had been silent for months came alive again, broadcasting old songs, poems, and tales of human courage. Even people who had lost everything found comfort in repeating those words. Every time the Varn mocked them, humanity answered with more belief. One night, a group of children gathered in a shelter. One of them asked the old veteran, "Do you think the ghost is real?" He smiled faintly and said, "If people believe in him, then yes, he's real enough." The child thought for a moment. "Then they can never win, right?" The old man looked at the flickering lamp, its weak flame stubbornly burning in the dark. "They can only win if we stop believing," he said softly. Meanwhile, the aliens grew restless. Strange things were happening within their own ranks. Some of their soldiers refused to go near the central eye's shadow. Others reported seeing moving lights on the ground that their scanners couldn't identify. A few even claimed to hear human voices whispering through their helmets. The commanders dismissed these reports as technical errors, but deep inside, they felt something unfamiliar: doubt. The laughter that once filled their broadcasts was gone now. Silence replaced it. The Varn, who had come to teach humans reality, were beginning to feel the weight of something they couldn't explain. The veteran continued his work quietly, his messages shorter now but sharper than ever. "Fear," he said in one broadcast, "is the oldest language in the universe. You taught it to us. Now we're teaching it back." Those words became a symbol. Resistance fighters scratched them onto walls, wrote them on scraps of metal, whispered them before each mission. In one corner of the world, a group of scientists decoded something incredible. They discovered that the aliens' technology wasn't just advanced, it was emotional. It responded to calm, order, and perfect logic. That's why human chaos confused them so much. Every act of defiance, every unpredictable move sent ripples through their systems like static. The veteran laughed softly when he heard this. "So all we had to do was be ourselves," he said. Under his direction, the Resistance began turning human imagination into a weapon. They created false images of monsters and glowing figures using hacked alien projectors. To the Varn's sensors, these looked real. Suddenly, giant figures appeared in the clouds, shapes resembling human gods and heroes glowing like spirits of old. The aliens panicked. Their fleets moved erratically, firing into empty skies. Their commanders shouted for calm, but it was too late. The fear they once used against humans had come full circle. For the first time in history, myths had become real, not because of magic, but because people believed in them so fiercely that even machines reacted. The veteran watched the chaos from his shelter. His eyes were tired, but his heart was steady. He knew the war was far from over, yet he also knew something important had happened. Humanity had changed. They were no longer a species waiting to be saved. They were the storm that refused to end. He whispered into his radio one last time that night. "They came to erase our stories," he said. "Now they live inside them." The signal echoed across the world, reaching the ears of farmers, soldiers, and children alike. Above them, the alien ships trembled in the skies. Haunted by legends they no longer dared to mock. And somewhere in the distance, as thunder rolled over the horizon, a quiet voice spoke through the static. A voice that didn't sound human or alien, but something in between. It said only one thing: myth acknowledged. The old soldier closed his eyes and smiled. The galaxy had finally begun to remember who humans really were. The days after the blackout of the central eye became a turning point for Earth. For the first time in years, people could see stars shining freely above their heads. It gave them something they hadn't felt for a long time: peace. The world was still broken, cities still burned, but that sight reminded everyone of what they were fighting for. In hidden camps and quiet corners of the ruined cities, humans gathered to share stories. They told tales of courage, sacrifice, and small victories that gave strength to others. It didn't matter if every story was true. What mattered was that people believed again. Belief had become the strongest weapon left on Earth. The aliens, the Varn, were no longer confident. They still had their warships and technology, but they had lost control of something far more important: fear. The humans were no longer afraid of them. In fact, many began mocking the Varn, using humor to fight the darkness. Street artists painted murals of alien soldiers running from human ghosts. Singers created songs that spread secretly through resistance radio, their lyrics full of hope and courage. The aliens had no way to silence it all. The veteran, the man people called the Ghost, continued to guide the resistance from the shadows. He rarely spoke now, but when he did, every word carried weight. His calm voice became the sound people trusted most. He always reminded them, our strength is not in machines, it's in what we remember. The resistance had grown smarter. Instead of fighting directly, they learned to use the alien systems against them. The engineers hacked their networks, spreading false messages and signals that made the Varn think humans had developed new weapons. The aliens began wasting their energy chasing ghosts, literally. One evening, deep inside a mountain base, the veteran received a message from a small group of human scientists. They had discovered something unexpected. During the chaos after the blackout, a strange signal had been detected. It wasn't human, but it also didn't sound like the Varn. It came from beyond their fleet, far out in space. The scientists believed it was a distress call from another world once conquered by the Varn. They wanted help, but not with weapons. They wanted knowledge on how humans had resisted fear itself. When the veteran heard this, he stayed silent for a long moment. "They're afraid too," he finally said. "That means we're not alone in this fight anymore." The message spread quickly among the resistance. The thought that other worlds were watching gave people even more courage. They were no longer just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for every world that had suffered under alien rule. Meanwhile, within the alien fleet, cracks were beginning to show. Their soldiers argued more. Their commanders grew impatient. Reports of malfunctions increased. Some soldiers claimed to see strange lights moving through their ships shaped like human figures. The higher officers dismissed it as technical interference, but the lower ranks whispered among themselves. Rumors began that the humans had summoned something, spirits born from their myths, now haunting the Varn. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. The fear was enough to weaken them. One alien commander, desperate to restore control, ordered a massive retaliation. "Crush their hope," he said. "Show them their myths mean nothing." They planned to strike the last human stronghold, a network of resistance bases hidden beneath a frozen wasteland. The attack was massive, and the humans knew they couldn't fight it with weapons alone. The veteran gathered his closest fighters and engineers in the dim light of an underground control room. Maps and old computer screens flickered around them. "If they find us, we can't run," one young fighter said. "They'll destroy everything." The old man looked at them quietly. His eyes, though tired, carried a steady fire. "Then we don't run," he said. "We show them what it means to fight as humans." He revealed a new plan: Risky, almost impossible, but it was the only choice. The Resistance would use the alien network to broadcast one final message across Earth and beyond. It would not be a cry for help. It would be a reminder, to both humans and the galaxy, of what Earth truly stood for. As the aliens approached, the Resistance worked non-stop. Wires were connected, old transmitters repaired, power rerouted through half-broken circuits. The air was filled with sparks, sweat, and determination. Every person had a role. Every action mattered. Outside, the first flashes of alien fire lit up the frozen sky. The ground shook as their ships descended. Yet inside the bunker, no one panicked. Instead, they began the broadcast. The veteran's voice filled the airwaves, reaching across continents and even into space. His words were simple but powerful. To those who think humanity is broken, he said, remember this. We were born from fire, floods, and storms. We are not defined by what we lose, but by what we rise from. You may have silenced our cities, but not our voices. You may have destroyed our weapons, but not our will. You came to erase our stories, yet now you are part of them. As his voice echoed through the signal, something strange began to happen. The broadcast wasn't just sound, it carried an energy. The alien systems, so logical and perfect, began to react unpredictably. Their screens flickered with human faces, smiling, crying, shouting, alive. The Varn commanders panicked. It's a viral code, one shouted. Shut it down. But they couldn't. The broadcast had already spread through their network. The more they tried to erase it, the stronger it became. Human songs, voices, and laughter flooded their systems like light piercing through darkness. Down on Earth, people could hear the broadcast echo through their old radios and phones. Even broken devices came to life for a few minutes, playing the same message. Families held each other, tears running down their faces. For the first time, the Varn were forced to listen to the sounds of human life. Their ships began losing control. Lights dimmed, engines faltered. The alien communication grid collapsed under the weight of emotion it couldn't understand. To the humans watching from below, it looked as though the sky itself was trembling. The veteran, sitting beside the transmitter, watched the monitors flicker with alien confusion. He turned to his team and said softly, "They always said our stories were foolish. Let's make sure they remember them forever." He sent the final signal, a recording of thousands of human voices saying one word together: freedom. The sound rippled through space, bouncing from one alien ship to another. Some exploded, some shut down completely. Others simply floated, powerless and silent. Then came a strange calm. The sky cleared. The alien lights faded. For hours, no one spoke. People emerged from their shelters, looking upward in disbelief. The night sky was filled only with stars again. No more humming engines. No glowing warships. Just silence and hope. The veteran sat quietly near the broken transmitter, the glow from its screen fading. His body was weak, but his heart was peaceful. The others gathered around him, unsure of what to say. One of them finally whispered, "Did we win?" He smiled faintly. "We didn't win a war," he said. "We won back our soul." The people around him understood. The aliens might still exist somewhere out there, regrouping, rebuilding, but something had changed forever. The Varn had learned fear, and humanity had learned unity. In the following days, humans worked together to rebuild their world. The old borders and differences no longer mattered. They planted crops again, repaired old machines, and taught their children not just about science and survival, but about courage. The myth of the ghost became a story passed from one generation to another. People didn't even know his real name anymore. He didn't need one. His story had already become part of Earth's identity. Even the aliens who survived, the few Varn stranded on Earth, began to see the world differently. They witnessed how humans cared for one another even in ruins. They saw laughter return to faces that had once known only pain. It confused them at first, then humbled them. One alien soldier, once proud and cruel, quietly said to his companion, "They fight with hearts, not with weapons. That is why we could never win." The humans never heard those words, but they didn't need to. Their victory wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. The fear that once filled the skies was gone, replaced by something brighter. As the sun rose over the recovering Earth, the light touched every broken city, every shattered home, and every soul that had refused to surrender. The people who stood there knew one truth that would guide them forever. They had once been the prey, but now even the stars would remember the day when human myths taught an empire to fear. Months passed after the silence of the alien fleets. The skies above Earth had never looked so peaceful. The stars twinkled again, not as threats but as old friends watching from afar. The people of Earth had survived the darkest days, and now they stood at the edge of something new. The old cities were still scarred, towers broken, roads cracked and forests burned, but humans began rebuilding piece by piece. Every brick that was laid, every seed that was planted carried a promise that life would continue. No one waited for help anymore. The people who once hid underground now worked under open skies, using their own hands to heal the world they had nearly lost. The veteran, the man everyone called the Ghost, had vanished after the final broadcast. Some said he died beside the transmitter that day, giving his last strength to save the planet. Others believed he was still alive, walking somewhere among the people, helping quietly like he always had. No one knew for sure, but everyone agreed on one thing: his spirit lived in every person who refused to give up. The resistance groups that once fought in secret now became builders and teachers. The same people who had learned to destroy enemy machines were now using that knowledge to repair power grids and water systems. They worked without borders, without flags. The war had taught them that humanity's strength wasn't in nations, it was in unity. Children were the first to bring joy back. In towns that had been silent for years, laughter returned. They played in open fields, pretending to be heroes of the stories their parents told. "I'm the ghost," one child would shout. "I'll scare the aliens away." Another would reply, "No, I'm the one who talks to the stars." The adults watched and smiled. It felt good to hear laughter again. One evening, in a quiet camp near what used to be a great city, a small group of survivors gathered around a fire. They were tired from rebuilding all day, their hands covered in dirt, but their hearts were light. The oldest among them, a woman with a calm voice, began telling a story to the children sitting nearby. She said, "Long ago when the stars went dark, the aliens came to teach humans fear. But they didn't know that humans were born from fear. We learned to turn it into courage. We didn't fight with strength, we fought with hope. That's how we won." The children listened with wide eyes. One of them asked, "Did the aliens really laugh at us?" "Yes," she said softly. "They laughed at our stories, our myths, our dreams. They said we were foolish for believing in things we couldn't prove. But in the end, it was those very dreams that scared them the most." Her words carried through the night air, blending with the sound of wind rustling through half-grown trees. It was as if the world itself was listening. Far away in the sky, broken alien ships still drifted silently. Some had crashed into the oceans. Others remained in orbit, cold and empty. A few alien survivors had been found on Earth. They no longer fought. Instead, they observed, some even helped rebuild in small ways, sharing bits of their knowledge. Humans treated them cautiously but not cruelly. One alien, standing on a high hill, once said quietly to a group of humans working nearby, "Your world changed us." A young mechanic looked up and replied simply, "Ours changed too." They said no more, but both understood. The war had been brutal, but it had also taught both sides something about life, about emotion, about the unseen strength of a living heart. As the months turned into a year, Earth began to recover faster. Fields grew again, rivers cleared, and the nights became full of light. Campfires, lanterns, and the stars above. Every person carried a small piece of the story that had saved them. A council formed, not of politicians, but of survivors. They weren't chosen by votes or power, but by respect. These were people who had led with courage and kindness during the hardest times. Together they decided that humanity would never return to its old ways of greed and division. They created something called the Unity Code. It was a promise, written simply, no life is lesser. No story is forgotten. No fear is greater than our hope. Copies of the Unity Code were carved into walls, printed on metal plates, and even taught to children in new schools. It became the heart of the new Earth. One day, the old radio tower that had once carried the veterans' final broadcast came alive again. Its rusted lights flickered as if touched by unseen hands. A faint signal played across old frequencies. People nearby gathered, holding their breath. Then, through the static, came a familiar voice, tired, soft but unmistakably human. "If you can hear this," the voice said, "then the world has healed more than I ever dreamed. Don't look for me. Look for what we've become." The stories we told were not magic, they were mirrors. They showed us who we were and who we could be.
Keep telling them.
Keep believing. Because the moment we forget our stories, we become ghosts ourselves. Then the signal faded, leaving behind only silence. The people stood still for a long time, tears running down many faces. The children didn't understand the full meaning, but they could feel it, the warmth in the air, the pride in their parents' eyes, the sense that something sacred had just happened. That message spread across the planet within hours. Even those who didn't hear it directly spoke of it as if they had. It reminded everyone that legends never truly die. They simply move from words to hearts. In the years that followed, humans began exploring space again. This time, not to conquer or claim, but to connect. They built ships using both human and alien technology, designed not for war, but for peace. On their hulls, they painted symbols from every culture: dragons, eagles, suns, and stars. All the myths that had once been mocked but now stood as emblems of survival. Before each mission, captains would repeat the same line: "We carry our stories with us." The first expedition beyond the solar system found something astonishing. On a distant moon, they discovered an old alien structure, covered in carvings. Among them was a symbol that no human expected, a small drawing of Earth surrounded by light. Below it, in alien script, were words that translated to, "They taught us fear. Then they taught us courage." The humans who saw it wept quietly. Even those who had once been enemies had begun to understand. The war had ended not because one side destroyed the other, but because both sides had learned something essential about what it means to live. Back on Earth, new cities began to rise, beautiful, green, and full of life. The air was cleaner, the rivers flowed brighter. People worked not just to survive, but to make the world better. Festivals were held every year on the day of the Great Silence, celebrating the moment the alien fleets had fallen still. During those celebrations, fires burned across mountaintops and beaches. People would look up at the stars, remembering the stories of courage, fear, and hope that had saved them. They didn't just tell tales of war. They spoke about kindness, friendship, and the unbreakable will of the human heart. Somewhere, perhaps far away or maybe closer than anyone realized, the veteran, the ghost, might still have been watching. Maybe he was just a man who had given everything, or maybe he had become something greater, a part of the story itself, living forever in the hearts of the people he inspired. Years later, a child sitting under the night sky asked her grandmother, "Do you think the ghost is real?" Her grandmother smiled gently and said, "As long as you believe in courage, he's real." Because he was never just one person, he was all of us. The child looked up at the stars, her small face glowing in the firelight. "Then he'll never die," she whispered. The grandmother nodded. "No, my dear. He'll live in every story we tell, in every brave heart that chooses hope over fear." As the wind blew softly through the trees, the stars above seemed to shimmer a little brighter. Somewhere in that endless sky, a silent signal still drifted, a whisper left behind by a man who believed that stories could save the world. It said only one thing: myth never dies. It only changes form. And so humanity moved forward, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as storytellers, carrying with them the oldest truth in the universe: that even in the face of impossible odds, belief can turn fear into strength, and hope into victory. The galaxy would remember them, not for their weapons or their wars, but for the day when the smallest voices of Earth taught even the stars what it meant to be truly alive.